Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. There is a rise of grey divorces currently in Australia. So today we're going to be covering the types of divorces you can be going through when you're grey, which I find a little insulting, Mum, because I have grey hair in some areas and I'm not in my age bracket that they are referring to. So grey divorces, they're saying around 50-year-olds and onwards?
Up to, I've seen up to 80-year-olds get divorced.
So today we're going to be talking about those types of divorces. Those ones, there's 4 types that we're going to touch on today. That's those who've been married for 30 to 40 years, those who married really young, or those who are on their second or third marriage, or those who've ended up accidentally in a de facto relationship by living with a partner, or those who've accidentally been separated due to illness or retirement home locations, etc. So it's a different type of divorce. And Mum, we're going to discuss some things that people might not have thought about yet and some considerations that you might need to keep in mind if you are currently going through a grey divorce. And my apologies again to anybody who's insulted by that, because I know I'm grey and there's nothing wrong with that, is there, Mum?
Well, yes, I think we mean the really, really greys.
Yeah. So the average divorce age is going up. We just had a look a minute ago. Men as of 2021 was 46 and women were 42. But I think that's even gone up since then, hasn't it, Mum?
I think it probably has. But also so is the age of getting married. It's crept up slightly over the last sort of 20 years.
So there's a lot of different things that maybe people don't have to think about so much. And one of the differences I think people need to consider, and you mentioned this straight up, let's knock this one out of the park to start with, Mum, is no kids or kids. Yeah. If there's kids, what is it that you've noticed in grey divorces that you've done that people need to be aware of if you're breaking up, you're a grey divorce and you've got kids who are probably adults?
Yes. Well, when I say no kids, I mean that there's usually no custody arrangements have to happen and no provision for the care of children. But adult children can be a real problem for those people who are going through a separation or divorce as when they're older, particularly, Laura, if it's not their father or their mother, that's the other party. If it's been a second marriage, for instance, then the kids can be quite problematic. But from a purely legal point of view, when we're looking at future needs, kids is off the table if you haven't got any under 18. So that's that problem solved. I think the adult children, which we'll talk about later, that sort of interference and those issues loom large in the mind of an older person getting divorced because they want it to be fair for the kids.
Can we talk about what separation is? Like what is the definition of separation? Because you said some people in the grey divorce world might get confused by what the legal term of separation is.
Yeah,
what it means.
It's a funny thing. So what separation, it's defined in the Act, but what separation is 2 people living apart because of a conscious choice of one of the parties, I think is the best way of doing it. So I might have mentioned this case years ago. There was a doctor, I think from New Zealand, who in his mind, he was leaving his wife and he flew, I think, to the Cook Islands to live there, and he had a partner there. And as far as he was concerned, the marriage was done and dusted, but he never said anything. The court held that wasn't a proper divorce. You've got to let the other person know. But another sort of separation is the ones where you're separated through illness or just business or work. That's definitely under the family law not counted as a proper separation. And that came up to be tested in Stanford, where the lady, it was a second marriage of these people, although they've been married since 1971. The lady ended up in a nursing home and her children brought an application to the court while she was still alive to get the husband, in this case, out of the house, I think, and to get some property divided for their mother to support her in the nursing home. But the evidence was that he was visiting her, he was still paying for her nursing home needs, and that at the time that she went into the nursing home, they were an intact couple. They were still getting along fine and they were a married couple. And it went all the way to the High Court. Everyone had a little chop at it from on the way up, that a single judge, a full court decision. But the High Court said that the court has to consider whether it's just and equitable to have a property settlement. That's their first step. And in this case, where the parties essentially had an intact marriage, there was no grounds for bringing an application at all. So in older people, that happens more often. Someone gets ill, or dare say one of the children comes up and sort of takes the other person to their place, or, you know, it can be an element of elder abuse in taking their autonomy away from them, particularly if you haven't got on with the stepmother or you're worried. The elephant in the room, Laura, they're worried about their inheritance.
All right. So what you're saying is the adult kids talking about inheritance, ironically, we just did an episode on that, but they're worried, oh my gosh, my inheritance, I'm going to miss out. So I'm going to make my parent do the legal things to make sure that I mean, surely not everyone thinks like that.
No, but it's in their mind.
Yeah. Okay.
They're always worried. You know, it's on the classic sort of movie theme thing where an older man marries a young, attractive woman and everyone's going, you know, what about our inheritance? Because their estate will go to their partner.
All right. So when we're talking about ill health, and we've talked about what separation is, actually, we should probably touch on then. So there are people that have been together forever, and then sadly, you know, something happens and they have to go to a retirement village. But then there's also those people that have obviously, maybe they've had a partner who's passed away and they've just kind of recoupled, like they've got a girlfriend or something that they hang out with for comfort reasons. But do some people get into a bit of trouble with particularly the older generations understanding that what de facto is?
Yeah.
So what does de facto mean?
A genuine living together on a genuine domestic basis. I don't know if that helps you much with the definition.
Does that mean like cooking dinner, watching TV together?
Yeah, there's all those sort of little tests they look at. So when we first saw this legislation for de facto, we worried that living in spending a couple of nights in a student accommodation might accidentally make you de facto with all or any of them. So it's got to be the 2 years, and it has to have been, usually you may not have your own one common residence, but it might be going between the various residences.
So that actually, so if you're listening and you've got a partner who lived in their own house, but you just visited each other all the time, that can be counted as de facto.
Yep. In fact, you could have someone, and there have been cases of people married who have a de facto partner at the same time.
Oh dear.
In other premises. So yeah. So there are a whole stack of tests.
Okay. So keep that in mind if you're going through that. Now, the other thing we need to talk about, Mum, that you really do say people get tripped up with a lot in the grey divorce is houses and furniture.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you see in grey divorces that's different from normal divorces of younger people?
I think it comes from grey relationships where they start dating when they're older. And by the time you're 50 or so, 60, usually have a house, your own furniture, and they have two houses and lots of furniture. And so they might move into one person's house and sell the other place and sell the other person's furniture, and then, or they might even both sell their houses and then move into one house together. All of those things. And what happens when they separate then is that there's this real sad feeling that you've lost what you had, that you had your own house and you had your own furniture and you were perfectly happy until this happened. And then, yeah. And so there's a lot of recrimination. And I've had a lot of cases, particularly in older people, where they want to write down everything they had, all the furniture they sold and lost, and they want to be reimbursed for all of that. There's just a lot of hurt because their stuff has become their stuff, and selling it was a huge sacrifice. And now you can't get that back again. So it does become, and it's worse if people move into one house and then the relationship's over. The person who leaves is usually, they didn't own that house and they've got nothing.
So what can our listeners do if they find themselves in that situation where they're the ones they've sold their house, they've sold their stuff, they've moved into their partner's place, and now they have to move out again? Because obviously they're probably not going to be the ones who want to stay, even though they technically would be allowed to be the one that stays. What can they do? What do you suggest to them to make sure that it's fair?
Well, we can't sort of cry over spilt milk. That's the thing. I never say that to a client, but you can't get those things back. And it's not the insurance value, it's the sentimental value that you're sad about, but it's gone for good.
But they're allowed to have the furniture that in the house that they were living in, sure.
They'd like to have, but usually they will have got rid of some of that, particularly in a controlling relationship. They have to sell all of theirs. But the
In the
stuff
new
that's
house.
still there in the new house that says they can take with them, yes.
Well, even if it's not theirs, like if it's like just because it was there when they moved in, surely it doesn't mean they
can't take that. No, I mean, if they brought any furniture with them, they can take that out. Yeah.
Okay.
So couples traditionally cherry pick the best of the house, what they've got, and then combine the best things. Yeah. So it is very sad. And if you've got to move out, they can find themselves having to start from scratch, paying stamp duty and everything when they didn't before. But the thing to remember is that you're still entitled to a share of the property. If you've been together for 2 years, you still have property settlement, and the furniture you had and what you sold from your old place, that's a contribution from you. So even if it's all gone now, even if you used all your money, I've heard of some people using it on home improvements on the other person's house, that doesn't mean they get to keep that with no compensation. And it may be that, the person whose house was renovated may have to sell it to properly compensate the other person. So that's like a situation. Also, too, generally with older people, they may both be retired and they may both be getting the pension.
And what happens then? What happens when they're both getting the pension? How do you figure out what's what there?
For property settlement, it doesn't really matter. They'll get their share. They'll both be on the same footing, you see. Where it gets tricky is if one person's living off their superannuation and one person only had Centrelink payments before, which, the court only says that you have to ignore Centrelink payments when you're looking at future needs. So, there might have to be a splitting of superannuation as well. It's hard because people have no energy for this.
So if you're the one who's on pension, so that's Centrelink payments, and your ex is the one that had super and was living off that, when you separate and when you're doing the property settlement, the pension's not included, and then you split the super.
Yeah, you might have to split the super to live. So when you move in with someone, you may not be eligible for your pension anymore. That has to be given. So you would both be living on the superannuation.
Right.
That's just they're all hypotheticals, but these are things that happen differently with grey relationships.
So what about spousal maintenance? Can you apply for spousal maintenance if you're a grey divorcee?
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Do you do it differently, or is it the same?
It's the same. It's the same. The difference only is usually that the court's not going to expect you to look for work. So it's going to be taken as understood that you can't work, or that your ex can't work, or that you can't get a job because you're over 60 or whatever, or you're over 50 and you're a builder and you can't do it anymore, that sort of thing. And so there's more of a risk of spousal maintenance in a grey divorce than in a younger divorce.
So that's what I was about to say. What's the likelihood of getting spousal maintenance as an older person? And it's pretty high.
It is pretty high, even if the relationship wasn't terribly long. So there's big risks in throwing your lots in together and, in the relationship. Of course, there's all the benefits, and people go in, and I'm sure lots of them are very successful relationships.
I'm sure anybody who's having a successful relationship right now is not listening to this podcast.
And anyone who's in a situation like that and may consider one in the future, I think I have to say to you, prenup. Prenup. Yes. And it's probably what your kids would be saying to you anyway.
And we've got an episode on that, how to protect your property in your new relationship. So I'll put that in the show notes so that you can listen to that. Okay, so pensions, spousal maintenance, furniture. Another thing that you mentioned, Mum, was traditional roles.
Yeah.
Traditional roles and the grey divorcee. So can you explain what about traditional roles have you come across that causes problems?
Well, so your grey divorcees, the ones I'm thinking of, have grown up in the 50s and 60s, right? And they might be looking for your partner, or the new grey partner might be expecting he does all the money and you do all the housework and you do all the cooking and you do all the housey stuff. And that can trigger separations quicker than usual, because it doesn't show up until you're both living in one house, and suddenly this person who's perhaps been independent or has moved with the times finds themselves being thrust into this sort of traditional role, and it doesn't work. Yeah, and they often find too that if they've been raised that way, they do hand the finances over to their new partner, and they can lose a lot of money.
You know, you could find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. We're there waiting for you right now. If you want to get more out of the Divorce Course, all you have to do is go to the Divorce Course podcast at Facebook or TikTok, or the Divorce Course on Instagram. There we share bite-sized pieces of information and bite-sized inspiration and motivation to help you through this difficult time. Come and join our community and let us know you've joined. We'd love to see you there.
There's a lot of sweet talking that I've come across, very smooth talking older gentlemen who seem to sometimes take advantage of women on their own.
So do you find in the divorce negotiations for a grey divorce that some women in particular are, because they're from that era, feel like they should still do what their ex-husband is telling them to do? What would you say to any of the grey divorcees listening today who are from the good old days, the 50s and 60s, who have that traditional role understanding? What pep talk can you give them to make sure that they go in and fight for what's theirs?
Think of all of the things you've achieved in your life, and look at what young women are achieving now. You're no different to those young women. It's just the world has changed, and the world has changed now. You can stand up for yourself. No one's going to think of you as a harridan or a nag or anything like
Jezebel.
that. You're just a human being, and the world has moved forward. And if you're feeling oppressed because you feel like you've got to do the cooking and be controlled by if you're feeling that that's not right, that's because you're more mature and you're more of a modern person. So don't let that stop you getting your fair share.
Now, when it comes to future needs, in non-grey divorces, the future needs can be quite different.
Yeah, they can.
Because people could have all sorts of things. So what little differences are there in future needs for, and that's part of how the property pool division is considered. What's the issue with future needs in grey divorces?
So we're talking about Section 75(2) in marriages, and it's Section 90 something for de facto relationship. And the difference is that if you separate or divorce in your 30s or 40s, which is your average age, I think 40 something, you've both got a future where you can work and rebuild yourselves. So the court doesn't look miles into the future. They just look, how are these people going to be? If we divide it on properties, on contributions, how are these young people going to be in, say, 5 or 10 years? But with older people, dare I say elderly people, they have to look like they've only got the 10 years lifespan. They don't, or so, 10, 20. They don't have an option to go back to work usually, or they've only got a short working life to readdress or rebalance their finances. So the court tends to want to go towards equality pretty well. All things being equal, like in contributions, they assess your contributions, but future needs is usually equal unless one of you is ill or quite ill, and then there might need to be an adjustment and maybe even a spousal maintenance claim. But yes, so it's more often equal for older people than it is equal for younger people getting divorced for future needs. Yeah.
So when it comes to ill health, like how is that dealt with if one of the parties is really sick and the other isn't? And maybe even, they've only got a year to live or something. Like, do they get more of the property pool? Like,
no. So illness is like the ill person would normally get more of the property pool, but there comes a point if they're so ill that their prognosis is poor, then the brutality of it is their future needs aren't going to be as long as the other person's future needs, and then they begin to get less because the role is not to enrich their their coffers, I guess, for handing down to their children in their estate.
But that's where I see the problem, because there's kids out there that are like, this is not fair. You're going to pass, my parents are going to pass on, and the person who's married my parent is going to get most of the property pool. So is this where it becomes really nasty and there's adult children involved in the fight?
It can be. It can be mitigated by the older person using some good strategies in their wills to make it clear, okay, about that, or even giving gifts while they're alive to the children. But yeah, I mean, you think about it making a movie, like this would make a whole series. I think most of those American series were based on children who are angling for the inheritances. Look at, is it Succession?
Yes, I was going to say that. But so when you say, well, instead of that, you could just give gifts, like, are you allowed to, during the property settlement, to just go to your, 50-year-old son, here you go, here's a car? No?
You're not allowed to do that during property settlement and after separation, and you're probably not allowed to do it in anticipation of separation. But throughout, while you're alive, you can give money to your children.
Right.
Some people on pensions have limits, of course. But yes, but a goodwill is the key. A goodwill is the key because, and if you're in a grey relationship, you want to make sure that your partner has put provision for you to stay in the house or to leave the house, in the event of your death. That's the sort of thing where everyone ends up in a bit of a barney. And that's where Stanford went. Stanford, he was in the house, and I think the house might have been in her name, and the children wanted him out, wanted to sell the house.
And they didn't. He ended up not getting sent out. Wow. Okay. So not only are you dealing with, your grey years, not that there's anything wrong with that, which might be fun by the sounds of things, but you're also dealing with separation and potentially illness and, the end, like the shorter end of your journey. So what things can people do in this, Mum? How can they make the separation process the least painful for them? Like, what can they do differently? So it doesn't drag on, because when you think about it, most divorces I've heard about, like the stories we hear on TikTok and Facebook and stuff, these divorces, they battle it out for a year, then they go to court, and court drags on for 3 years. The last thing a grey divorcee is going to be wanting to do is be fighting out in court for the next 5 years, all this money or all this drama. So what can they do to make it go smoothly and get the heck out of a new life?
If you haven't started your property settlement application in the court, that is filed an initiating application or even an application for consent orders, or signed a financial agreement, then you should do that as soon as possible, because you can't have a property settlement if one of the people is dead unless it's started before they died. So in the event that you actually pass away, unless you've started proceedings in the court, then your property goes pursuant to your will. And if you hold your house as joint tenants, it immediately goes to your partner or your ex-partner. Yeah, so even if you've separated, the only protection, of course, is divorce, where they're dealt with as though they had died before you. So that's one thing. Don't muck around too long with bringing an application in the court. That case of Stanford, and I think it's not their real name, the lady did die halfway through, but she was very ill.
It's important to note that this is a community education. Okay, so this is not legal advice. You must always get your individual legal advice, but this is what Mum would suggest to someone if she saw them.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes, apart from saying do it better when you get together and hedge your bets, if we get people in who are already in an unfortunate situation, or if I was in that situation, this is what I'd do, and don't make the case the centre of your existence. You haven't got a lot of runway left, so enjoy your freedoms, gather fierce friends around, and be robust in advocating for yourself. It's really hard if they've been bullying you for 30 years, or if they are old school bullying, but you've got to stand up for yourself. And think about with the settlement, and this again is general advice, but if they come up with, if you get close to what you think is fair, I think a lot of people at the older stage of life, at my stage of life, would settle for that rather than keep fighting and wasting money, because the biggest difference between older people and younger people is younger people are going to make more money in their lifetime. There's more money coming to them. Older people usually no longer have either the capacity to borrow, the banks won't lend to them, or the capacity to keep earning. And so you don't want to be wasting your precious resources.
And I think it might be important to note when you are gathering your fierce friends, maybe not your kids, because I think in a young adult's mind, they can see the value in fighting for 5 years for a certain amount of money, because they know that might get some of it later themselves, but they don't know what I guess it would be like for you not wanting to spend the last, 20 years of your life in court. So, I guess make sure you're getting help and support from people probably your same age.
Yeah.
Do you think, Mum?
I think so. And I think that children may be outraged on your behalf and angry on your behalf, and they may be wanting revenge and to fix it. It might not be just money. It might be out of love for you, and they haven't reached your years of wisdom. Knowing how to, do an Elsa, let it go.
And I guess that's if the two people together have got separate types of kids. But I guess when it comes to grey divorce, if you've got adult kids and you've been married for 50 years or however long, I guess it would be really hard, really, really hard for, like, if they've been stuck with, say, a narcissist or an abusive relationship, for that person to then step out 50 years later and go, all right, I'm going to claim what's mine and I'm going to stand up for my rights. It would be, we speak to and deal with people all the time who've been in coercive control relationships for 5 years or 10 years, and it's really hard for them to change. So it must be even harder.
And it is hard because sometimes the children, little kids, they always want their parents back together again. The children will be resistant usually with the separation and want the parents to stay together. And if you're the one rocking the boat, you may find them being disapproving, but, you've got to live your own life and they need to come to terms with it. They've got their own grief.
Yeah. And I've heard some really sad stories recently from people who listen to this podcast, where the kids have gotten involved and the grandkids are being used to persuade. And there's a lot of horrible stuff that can go on and that normal younger divorces don't even have to deal with. Like, they're worried about losing their children in a children's custody battle. They're not worried about losing their children and their grandchildren.
Yeah,
so it is a whole different. So I think it's really important. And maybe I know a lot of older people, they're much more stoic and keep calm and carry on, but maybe go see a psychologist.
Yeah. And
get them to give you some hands, because it is going to be a different life and a change to what it is that you're used to. And I think it does take a stoic mindset, but also you are going to have to change the way you think. And I know what they say. It's really hard to teach an old dog new tricks. You know that saying, Mum?
No, I don't, Laura. Explain that to me.
And I'm not saying that we're teaching your old dogs, and I'm not saying that, any of this is tricks. But if you've been doing the same thing over and over again for a long time, you might need some extra help.
You do. I think you've been programmed. If you've been in a particularly narcissistic relationship, not only have you been programmed, you may find, I find that the kids have been triangulated against you as well, or they might line up some with you and some with your ex. And I remember hearing a story, this was back in the early 1990s, where a 22-year-old girl physically dragged the wedding rings off her mother's fingers. And I'm sure she regrets that, but she had been sort of, aligned with her father by inappropriate. So even though kids are growing up, they still have the same hurt feelings about separation. And I do remember Judge Bell once refusing to have a 40-year-old daughter of the relationship come in to give evidence. He said, she's a child of the marriage. She's flown in from Mount Isa, Your Honour, someone said, and she's 40. And the judge said, I don't care if she's 50. she's still a child of the marriage and she's not giving evidence in my court. So, yeah, because he had a pretty good understanding, obviously, of the impact on kids. So the whole family disintegrates. It's hard to walk away. And it's really hard when you think you've probably stayed there. A lot of women have stayed there for the benefit of the family. And then they see everyone set up and they go, right, now I can have some me time. I don't have to put up with it anymore. And then there's this awful pressure on you to just go back in your box.
If you feel like maybe there's some elder abuse going on with your children, if they're forcing you to stay or if they're forcing you to see a lawyer to change wills, etc., definitely ring 1-800-ELDER-HELP. And the number is 1-800-353-374. And that's a free...
that number again?
1-800-353-374, and it is a free call phone number, automatically redirects to callers seeking information and advice on elder abuse. And I think in the divorce situations for greys, I think that's something that everyone needs to look out for, on top of the general domestic violence situations that can occur. And you can always call 1-800-RESPECT. You are suffering from that. Or if you feel like you are in danger, of course, call the police.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that was a bit of a down point on it. But on the plus side,
yes,
people have happily married. The next time they might be lucky.
So you can go next time. Do you know what I envisage if I think a great idea would be to get your property settlement, and I know you would love this idea, Mum, but you're happily married, I know that. But jump on a ship and go on a cruise and just enjoy your freedom and look, I've got a pop and he's been my gran passed away a while ago, but he repartners and he's happy. You know, you can go and find love again. There's no rules. And I'm going to say it now, grey hair is cool. Okay. Grey hair is actually cool. So this grey divorce thing, I don't like the term, but I get it. It is a different world and it can be a lot more drama.
Yeah.
So I hope that you are all okay.
I think a lot of the older people, I mean, I know with my friends, not many of my friends aren't on social media and we don't have that connection that younger women can have and support each other. So it is harder, but you lean on your friends. Chances are if you've been in a narcissistic relationship with them, they didn't like him anyway. So they'll be there for you.
Go and find a craft group or a botanist group, or go join some jewelry making or something. Make some new friends. Yeah. All right, Mum, thank you so much. Hopefully you're not going to go through a grey divorce anytime soon, Mum. I'll be very upset. It's already the child having an
pressure.
Pressure. See? Wow. No, you do what you need to do, Mum.
Because it matters to the children that their grandkids have got a stable. Grandparents said, so there are unique pressures on a grey divorce. Yeah. But that's okay. So far, so good, Laura. Coming up 30 years next year. So I think it's too hard to claim another man.
All right. I can't believe you just said that. All right. All our best to everyone listening, sending you all our best. And you can, of course, email us at thedivorcecourspodcast@gmail.com if you've got any other podcast ideas, or you can come and find us at on Facebook or Instagram if you've got social media, or you can even do our DIY divorce blueprint, which we'll open doors for in a couple of months. And we have some lovely grey divorce members. So you won't be on your own.
And we have a question and answer every week, don't we, Rose? So we talk to them. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Take care. Thank you, Mum.
Bye-bye,
Thanks,
Laura.
everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lyn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.